Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for coming. You'll definitely want your phone or laptops. Laptop would be great. Make sure that everything's on silent, though. All your noisemakers are off, as you will be, interacting with all of those devices. So, for this talk, I really want you to walk away with actual data, actual research, not just theory, but player signal that you can bring back to your team or use immediately. So before we dive into it all, make sure you scan this QR code or go to the link. And like I said, make sure you have your laptop handy. You can follow along with me, but would prefer that you actually run the test, as I will be going step by step through it. All right, let's get into it. So I really want you to feel this scenario for a second. You've got $500,000, one direction, no A/B tests, no safety nets. No, let's see how it performs and let's go from there. This is not a hypothetical situation. This is a Tuesday at most studios. You're about to make a call that will shape every creative you run, every store asset you build, every UA dollar you spend at launch. And you can only pick one. Take a second, really think about it. Which direction would you bet on? So this is the same game, 4 completely different ways to position it. Let's read through these a little bit. A is about skill-based combat and competition. B is about collection and roster depth. C is about frictionless progression, idle, low-pressure play. And then D covers narrative and world building. These are not made up. These are real archetypes that show up in UA creative decisions every single day. And here's the thing. Any one of these could be right, but any one of these could also bomb. Without data, it's all a roll of the dice. All right, moment of truth. You have to allocate a full $500K to one of these choices. Which will it be? Raise your hand if you think it's A. Raise your hand if you think it's B. C. D. All right, hands down. Now put your hand up if you feel really confident about your choice. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, now lower it if it feels like it's a flip of a coin. So we all think it's a flip of a coin. This is what happens, though, when smart, experienced people don't have data. Everyone's right, everyone's wrong, nobody knows. Now, hold on to the feeling. We're about to see what actual players have said. So these are results from a PickFu survey targeting real mobile RPG players. Option D, narrative fantasy, came out on top. Players want to be immersed. They don't just want to optimize their builds. B still resonated, collection mechanics, building a roster, unlocking characters. I know this usually to be important in games I've developed, but that's speaking off of experience, not current data from RPG gamers. There was no definitive vote within our group, all 4 choices when we first did the exercise, and that's the point. Without external signal, even the most experienced operators are making educated guesses. This isn't to say that the other directions are wrong here. There's always a way to make these things work, but why go through the extra effort of forcing a concept when you could build off something strong as a starting point, grounded in player preference? So as I'm sure you've seen, ultimately decisions without data are guesses. This slide is the thesis of everything I'm going to talk about and share today. We're a smart industry. GDC is full of people who are deeply talented and experienced, and we still get it wrong. Constantly, because we're not always operating on signal. Often it's rooted in gut or feeling. Every creative review where someone's like, I just feel like X is stronger. Every roadmap debate that becomes a bit of a political battle. Every soft launch where you find out if your bet paid off 6 months later, $1 million later, Testing won't eliminate risk, nothing truly does, but it tilts the odds in our favor before you're spending real money, allocating real sprint time on any one concept or idea. So who am I to be telling you this? Let me give you 30 seconds of context. So my role at Scopely sits at the intersection of product, marketing, and UA, which means I'm in the room for a lot of these decisions where a wrong call has large monetary consequences. In that environment, you don't get to guess. Every feature, every character, every store asset, every creative direction, you're either improving conversion or it's costing the business. That discipline is what I want to share today. What I'm walking you through is not theory, it's what I actually do to reduce risk before production, before paid spend, before we're committing that time. All right, now let's talk about the tool that makes that possible. PickFu is an on-demand consumer research platform with built-in panels. You can filter specifically for gaming behaviors like your favorite game genre, platform, spend levels, play frequency. What makes it different and why I use it so much is speed. I can have directional signal in less than an hour, and the amount of decisions that I'm constantly making, I can't wait weeks, months, sometimes even days to get signal. I'm not using it for deep qualitative research or to craft behavioral funnels. I'm using it to answer specific questions fast before I commit teams, before I start an experimentation loop. Which feature makes mobile gamers more likely to download and play? Now I have a direction on what to lead with for App Store Creative. Is our UI intuitive? I can do a click test to see where players are naturally moving and what they're thinking and further refine the experience. I use it when I need quick clarity to move to larger decisions. It's one tool in a larger stack, but for fast directional decisions, it's one of my most used tools. And here's the framing I use with my teams. We're not using PickFu to magically predict a winner and move at warp speed with full confidence. We're using it to eliminate obvious losers early, refine weak concepts, and graduate stronger ones to different ways of validation. By the time something hits production, it's already been filtered through player signal multiple times. The ROI isn't just the lift that we would see, but it's also waste reduction. How much did you not spend on a creative direction players would never respond to? How many sprints did you not burn on a feature that ranked last in every segment? That's the shift from let's validate to let's pre-qualify. Pre-qualify your ideas before they become expensive. All right, enough context. Let's actually run a test. So a quick logistics check. If you haven't already, now's the time to scan this QR code. There's resources so you can follow along with the interactive part of the workshop and run your own tests. The page has everything, instructions for setting up your account, promo codes for free tests, and sample assets if you don't want to test your own game. Following along is optional. You can also just watch me, that's fine, but this workshop is designed to be interactive, and you'll run actual tests alongside me and get real results back, and then we'll go through each of them. If you're product, art, UA, marketing, live ops, this is directly relevant to your workflow. Just a disclaimer, live workshops are a little unpredictable, so if at any point we run into issues, don't worry, you can bookmark the page, and then we have 2 people in the audience. Just raise your hand and they can help. So let's get into it. For those of you with your own games, you'll need your game title, you'll need a short list of features and screenshots from your App Store page, or just gameplay imagery. Don't overthink asset selection. You're not running something that's a really heavy lift or a multiple month research study. You're getting directional data on the assets that you have. Whatever you have is okay to test with. Once you've created your account, hold tight. I'll walk you through the first step, or the first test step by step, and then we'll get into it. But first, let me give you a quick map of where we're headed today. So here's how today is structured. We'll run 2 live tests, one for genre and feature validation, and then we'll run another to rank App Store screenshots. After the workshops, we'll talk about how we can connect the insights across tests, because one data point is useful, but a pattern across multiple tests is where the real leverage is. You'll leave with playbooks, resources, and then hopefully data that you can share with your team. And then, of course, the QR code that you see here will stay live after the conference, so when you're at your desk, when you get home, you can still access it. All right, before we fully get into it, and maybe you're potentially still setting up, I want to talk about why most teams don't test and why it ends up costing them. Usually, research is really slow. You need a team, you need a few months and time to ingest the results, and by then, a lot of opportunity has passed. For faster studies, such as an internal playtest, they're often small, and they're biased towards the loudest voice in the room. Also, keep in mind, for those types of tests, you're filtering through people who already believe in the product. This is usually where opinions start becoming strategy. That one team member who's really passionate about idle mechanics, who loved a competitor's creative, the designer who's convinced deep narrative is what the audience craves. None of that is bad. Experience matters. But when you're making big bets or you're committing time, you want signal, not just internal consensus. And when you combine fast deadlines, fuzzy signals, you're ultimately making a lot of guesses. The cost of testing in quick cycles early is small. The cost of finding out later or during a pivotal campaign is huge. And that brings me to the other thing I see go wrong. It's not about whether teams test, but it's also about what they're doing with the data. This is the mistake I see most often. Teams run tests, they look at results, they put it in a deck, and then nothing changes. The decision they were already leaning towards still happens. That's not testing, that's validation theater. You ran the test to feel better about a decision you already made. The discipline is asking 3 key questions before you ever start. What does the decision inform? What result would actually make us change course? Who needs to act on this? If you can't answer those, don't run a test. You're not ready to use the results. When you can answer them, though, testing becomes decision velocity. You stop having the same debates in every meeting. The data does the arguing for you. So what does this actually look like in practice across a real team? Here's how we do it. So on my teams, we use it across every vertical. Like I mentioned in my intro, I work across product, UA, creative. And so we're really trying to touch every vertical within the user funnel. Anytime we're about to commit resources to a direction, that's a candidate for a fast validation test. Character designs before the art team builds them out, store screenshots before a Google Play experiment, feature copy before it gets written into a product spec, creative concepts before production. The earlier in the process that you're testing, the cheaper the insight is. A $100 PickFu test that kills a bad direction is one of the highest ROI moves that you can make. All right, let's get into it. First workshop. This one is foundational. You can run this test at any stage of your game's lifecycle and get something useful out of it. So this is the first scenario we're pressure testing today. You're working on a live RPG title. You have more feature ideas in your backlog than you have sprint capacity, and you're not sure which one to prioritize. At this point, you may have some community signal or data that's your first filter. But once you understood those layers and have clear goals, the question then becomes, what will actually move the needle with real RPG players in the market right now? What do we think is the coolest? Not so good. This is where most teams are flying blind. I've sat in on so many sprints like this where competitor envy is also a factor. This competitor just shipped a really cool feature. We need to follow suit. Okay, cool. But does your specific audience and your specific genre actually want that? Or are you just reacting to someone else's roadmap? We're going to replace that with actual signal live. Okay, now let's actually set this test up live together. Pull up PickFu on your laptop or your phone. All right. So first you'll create a new poll. It's in this top right corner and it brings you to this page. We'll be queuing up 2 questions here. First, starting with open-ended. So for this question, you can type it exactly as you see it and you'll want to replace the thing in quotes. This is the game title. This is open-ended. So here we're looking for qualitative texture. There's like when we get into single select, it gets you a clear winner, and we'll avoid yes, no questions. They're kind of a waste of a test. As far as test types go, single select is my workhorse for quick validation. And then when we get into the other workshop, rank is super powerful when you're looking for order preference, not just a quick read on the top assets. And then I'm going to skip ahead to audience. So here for this specific test, we're going to go with 15. This is just a quick read. What I like to do in my everyday is start with like 30 or 50, and then I'm looking for trends in the data. Because after the test completes, you can actually add more respondents and see how it trends over time. In terms of country, we'll go with US, but ultimately you'll want to pick wherever your market is or wherever you want to go live, or if you want to do audience expansion or you're looking at different opportunities, you would select whichever. I always override the random audience. Gen Pop does have value, but in our case, we're specifically looking at mobile gamers. Filtering is really easy. In this case, I just did a quick search for mobile, and then I'm checking yes. So everyone who responds is a mobile gamer. Commonly, I'll also do App Store spending habits. This is something where I want to see like what the results look like, dependent on how long they're playing or how much money they're spending, or even their favorite mobile game genres. Like if you know you have an RPG or you know you're going after a specific audience, you'll definitely want to use this. But I don't filter for it here. Usually I keep it pretty light. And then when we get to demographic questions, this is where, if you imagine the end result where you can slice and dice as a pivot. So in here, I usually put favorite mobile game genre and any number of things I just covered, but it's a very easy search. So you can see here what's available. If you're not quite sure what you want, there is a whole section for games. I also like to do how many hours do you spend playing mobile games. You might want to see, depending on how engaged they are with mobile platforms or certain games, how the responses change. Maybe they like narrative, but then as people who spend more money and more time within a certain genre of game, you might see that they actually like idle better because it's a little bit better for their time and the amount of energy that they're putting in. So going back to the top, we're going to also test features here. So for this one, you're going to add features as answer options. Keep them short, player-facing, no marketing language, nothing that's going to lead them in any one direction. And then we already got into the audience. So one last thing, if you are following along, add promo code GDC 2026 feature, and then everyone hit launch. We're going to let this one run in the background and then come back to it. So I'll give you a second to orient yourselves. You can add promo code here, and to launch, if you feel confident, pay with one click. If you're curious what it looks like, you can preview it. Good? Okay. We're switching back. So while we're waiting for results, let's talk about where PickFu fits in the broader testing stack, because it's not meant to replace everything else. I like to think of it as a first filter. I use it to get directional signal fast, and then we're cutting obviously weak directions and sharpening the ones that are worth pursuing. After PickFu, strong directions move into deeper testing, A/B tests. Google Play experiments, an Apple PPO, click tests on paid, and then setting it live to see if there's any change compared to your baseline. This sequence matters. PickFu at the beginning means you're investing your deeper testing resource into ideas that have already passed a filter. You're not burning a Google Play experiment slot on something that was going to flop anyway. So when the results do come back, and they should be close at this point, here's exactly what you're going to be looking for. First, the genre check. What did players think your game was? A gap between that and your intent isn't a failure, it's actually useful information. It simply means your title is sending a different signal than you planned. That's worth knowing before you start spending money on it. Then when we get into the features, top performers are your prioritization anchors. Bottom performers are the features you might be about to spend a sprint building for 0 conversion lift. Read the qualitative comments. Players will tell you why they chose what they chose. That language is gold for UA copy, store descriptions, feature callouts. Real words from real players, unprompted, better than any brief. And check the insight report for patterns across these responses. And this is what I meant when we were looking at the responder demographics. Themes that show up across multiple respondents are the signal worth acting on. Okay, I think we should have something back by now. Let's take a look at what players actually said. All right, looking at the genre question first, before we get into the feature vote, Realm of Valor. Strong RPG association across the board. I saw a lot of comments when I was digging through around fantasy and medieval themes. If this was what we were going after, I would say this is pretty successful. It's a good sign our title is doing its job. Notice that there is a follow-up poll suggestion here. PickFu's AI is already telling us where we should go next. Dig in to what the features are that they might care about. Well, we're one step ahead, but the whole idea here is that there's a compounding effect and we're connecting the tests in action. So if you ran your own test, you'll just click into question 2. If your test is not finished, you can actually see live as results are coming in, so you can always update it and kind of see as if you want to follow along and see where it's trending with those. I'm always impatient, so I'm always watching, wondering what's going on and seeing how things change over time. Now we get into the features for Realm of Valor. So look at this. Lore-based quest lines ran away with it. 8 votes, clear winner. Players want story. They want to be taken somewhere. That's not a surprise if you know RPG players, but now you have it in writing from real people in your target audience. Then we see hero customization. So it held at second, 27%. That's your runner-up, and honestly, a pretty strong signal too. Personal expression, identity, and RPG resonate. Those two together tell you something about what this audience values. Narrative, ownership. Now, look at the bottom. Guild gifting, 0 votes. 0. If that was on your roadmap, you just saved yourself a sprint. That's the test doing its job. And then we have the insight cards at the bottom here. Strong RPG association, target older demographics. This is not surprising. Customization appeal, and then story engagement. So these are quick little takeaway points when you don't want to read through all of the responses. But you can also, like I said before, get texture on the why for everything. Here, you can read through. Maybe there's something that stands out to you. A lot of it is about the top answer and why they chose it. It helps them establish world. It makes it more fun. Again, things you can really think about as you're crafting your marketing messaging, or you're thinking about even making adjustments if they talk about why they didn't like something. And then when you get into demographics, for this specific test, I kept it pretty top level, but this is why responding demographics are so interesting. You can look by vote. what people chose. If you know that something skews a little older, then maybe you want to weight this a little bit more. For this is just a qualifier, so it's less important, but maybe you know that your audience skews male and you want to go after the female demographic, then maybe you start thinking about, okay, are there other things that this group likes that maybe differentiate from this group? So we see here, 1, and then it's all color-coded up here. Great. Switching back. Did anyone run the test? Did anyone get any interesting results? I'm curious. Still running? Okay. Well, there's more to come. So if you're waiting for results, what do you actually do with this? Like, how do you take it off the screen and into real decisions? Lore-based quest lines goes to the top of your sprint backlog, not because PickFu is the only input, but because you now have external validation to back up your prioritization conversation. Try walking into your next roadmap meeting without any data. See how that goes. Guild gifting, 0 votes. This gets deprioritized or reframed. And it's worth asking, is the feature wrong or was the way you're describing it wrong? Both are useful things to consider before you start committing. The language from the insights cards, strong RPG association, that was from the title, fantasy and medieval themes, that goes directly to your UA and creative teams. Don't paraphrase this. Don't sanitize this. These are real words from real players, and it is completely unprompted. And then we move into workshop 2, because now we're going to take the same signal and figure out if your App Store page is converting. If workshop 1 was about product direction, general feelings, and fit, your App Store page is the first thing a player sees after they've clicked on an ad, and most teams spend tons of marketing dollars driving traffic to pages that never get validated. Let's fix that. The App Store page is your fastest and most controllable conversion surface. Players decide in seconds, often in 1 or 2 screenshots, whether your game is going to be worth their time. And here's the frustrating thing. You can have an awesome game, great UA creative, a compelling title, and still lose the install because your screenshot order is wrong. A mismatch at this stage will kill intent. And because the App Store page affects every channel, organic, paid, influencer, getting it right has an outsized impact. The good news here is that the App Store is one of the cheapest things to test and one of the highest leverage things you can optimize. Okay, same flow as before. Let's set this up together. Bless you. All right, so new poll, and then for this one, we're actually going with ranked. So you can see here a lot of the different test types. I had mentioned click test before. We have a 5-second test. This is where you want to see the emotional impact that a creative has. A lot of different ones, but for this specific one, we're going with ranked. Order matters here because we're asking them to critically look through each screenshot and sort them based on likelihood to download. So if you are following along, upload your screenshot package as individual images. Everything is drag and drop. You can add options and then just drag it directly in. And then if you scan the QR code and you're not really sure about assets, you can always grab some from the resource folder. For your question, exactly as it appears on the screen, we already have the audience answering why, but I put it in there because I want it to be top of mind and I want them to be considering this as they're making their choices. Our audience will be the same as before, 15 respondents, United States, and then we will choose mobile gamers. And then for this specific test, I want to understand mobile game genre. So you can either search it or you can scroll down and you're just going to add it, one simple click. Again, this is not filtering, it's just something that we'll see in the actual data. And then you'll add your promo code. This one is GDC 2026-ASO. Okay. Once you've entered that, hit launch, and then we'll keep moving, and we'll go through the results once they're back, maybe at the end when some of these tests have finished. So while we're waiting to go over the results, here's a few things we like to test as it relates to ASO, App Store optimization. In practice, we test almost every single attribute: icons, screenshots, messaging, app preview videos, and then how does that change per geo variant? So that's why PickFu becomes really helpful, because when you see that you can actually choose the different countries, you might want to run the same test in 4 to 5 different geos. And icons are often underestimated. A good icon communicates genre, tone, and quality signal in a thumbnail. This is something that they don't just see when they're landing, but it's also something they could find while they're exploring or shopping for a new game to play. We see meaningful conversion differences from icon changes alone. Screenshot order is where most of the conversion leverage is left on the table. Players look at that first 1 to 2 and decide, often not even expanding and scrolling. If your most compelling feature is not leading, or if you're opening with something that confuses the genre, you're losing people who might have enjoyed your game. Then there are the language and geo variants that we talked about. What works in the US will most likely fall flat in APAC and LATAM, as an example. Based on when someone lives, they're in entirely different cultural expectations, visual preferences, color associations, character appeal. It varies significantly by market. So you've got your winning order. Here's what you actually do with it. Take that validated sequence into live testing. Google Play Console lets you set up to 5 variants. Apple product page optimization is the iOS counterpart. You're measuring difference in conversion and install and retain rates. PickFu has pre-qualified the direction, and now you have a live A/B test that confirms lift at scale. A good bonus move is to run a dedicated follow-up test on just your first screenshot and variations of that. So even though you might have found a winner, you'll definitely want to make edits and see if you can really squeeze out that performance. This is the most influential thing on your entire store page, so you definitely want to make as many changes as you can to make sure that it's at maximum performance. All right, let's pull up the results from the second test. So this is for a puzzle game. And then you can see here, C1 was 60%. Clear board, legible tiles, obvious objective. Players knew exactly what they were getting here. And then look what came last, D, the level complete screen. The insight card tells you why as you scroll down. In plain English, avoid level complete screens. A result screen doesn't show you what you can actually do in the game. There might be cute characters. I think especially just by experience, you want to lead with that. But when it's not really showing you anything or showing you the type of gameplay that you're potentially getting into, then it falls flat, as you can see here. But in these insight cards, we already have some directive. So you can see show gameplay at a glance, use atmosphere without hiding gameplay, and then balancing charm with childish tone. So those are things that you can take into the creative. And when I was talking about making those edits to really squeeze out performance, this can give you a lot of really strong ideas. And then when you go into the demographics themselves, you can actually look for puzzle or look for whatever game that you specifically have and see if there's any movement in the choices that you have. So we're seeing 2 standouts, these centerpieces. So if I were gonna go make the changes, I would look at those cards, maybe pull some of the characters over into B, maybe add some effects, and then make sure that nothing is actually being covered. It's like, Hiding play is a common thing we see in App Store creatives, and this is something that players are very clearly saying they don't like. So that's the general loop. You get direction, you sharpen the direction, you graduate to live. And then you start, again, with a different asset or question. So it's kind of like a never-ending loop. All right, let's move into connecting it all. All right, we've run 2 tests. 1 test is a data point. Multiple tests across product cycle become a map, a picture of how players perceive value and engage with your game at every decision point. This is where the real leverage is. Not any single test that you've run, but the pattern that emerges when you test consistently and build on your learnings. Here's what a connected test can look like in practice. The feature that ranked highest in your Workshop 1 test, that's your lead creative hook in UA. That's your hero screenshot on the App Store. That's the first feature players interact with on onboarding. The genre language that players use in that open-ended response, that's your store description copy. That's your short description. That's your ad headline. That's how you write your product spec. When you run these tests consistently, product, UA, ASL, and creative are all working off a single source of truth and the same player signal. The message is coherent because it's grounded in the same source of truth, and we're all marching in the same direction and all seeing and reacting to the same things. That's what top studios do. It's not a single clever test. It's a culture of fast validation that runs through every team and every direction. Now, the limits of a test like this, because overusing any single tool is just as dangerous as not using it at all. PickFu is very good for directional signal on visual and framing decisions. It's fast, it's cheap, and it gets you out of that opinion loop that we talked about before. It's not a replacement, though, for deep usability studies, or if you're trying to understand why players are churning at a specific tutorial moment. You need session recordings, heat maps, behavioral analyses. PickFu won't tell you that. It's not a replacement for looking at your own game's analytics. Long-term engagement requires longitudinal data from your live environment. Use it for what it's good at. Pre-qualifying directions fast, cutting obvious losers early, and giving your team clarity on decisions that they would otherwise turn into a debate. Right tool, right moment. Before we wrap, 3 things I want you to take away from this. Pre-qualify, don't just validate. The highest ROI from player research comes before production, not after. Run tests when changing directions is still cheap. Connect your tests. Feature signal should inform your creative. Creative should inform your store page. Your store page should inform your UA targeting. Siloed testing is where the biggest gains get left on the table. And ask the 3 questions I mentioned before. What decision does this inform? What result would change our direction? And who is going to act on this? If you can't answer those, you're not ready to run a test. Everything you need is on the resource page, the playbooks, templates, promo codes, and then these slides. And that's a wrap. If you take one thing from today, go run a test this week. Not a big formal study, just pick something that your team is already debating, 15 respondents, see what real players are saying. You might be surprised, you might not be, but either way, you'll actually know. Slides and resources are at the link on the screen. Promo codes are on the resource page. If you want to keep nerding out about this stuff, feel free to ask questions, come find me. And then the PickFu team will be at booth 1249. They're great. Go say hi. Thanks.